It's not fair that you have to deal with some of the stuff you're dealing with. It's not fair that kids can't be kids anymore because of what's going on in the world. They're thrust into adulthood too early without the mental acuity to be able to handle some of the things that they're dealing with right now. Growth through children. You're going to think to yourself, hey, how do you grow through children? Well, there's some very good points I'm going to make today, but one of the reasons why I determined that we were going to have this lesson today is because of the fact that it was made very, very clear to me that through the leadership of this church that children are going to become a priority. We've put in some new classrooms so that we can have a teen classroom and a middle school room. There's going to be a partition through the between the two classrooms so that we can open up the classrooms and have two big classrooms together. We're going to put up a big TV so we can stream things. There is a lot of things going on, but I want you to realize that you can grow through children. Some of you in here saying, well, my kids are grown. My grandkids don't live here. I don't have kids right now. Let me explain this to you so that you get it. All of us can grow through children. If you look at your lesson notes today, the scripture that was read to you for a few moments ago is a very pointed scripture in terms of how Jesus views children. And I remember growing up and hearing the phrase that children should be seen and not heard. I do not believe that at all. If you know anything at all about me, I love the children. And if you are here and you are trying to be a Jesus follower, if you're trying to be Christ-like in your life, guess what? The number one thing you need to learn today is you need to love children. Now, are children easy? No. Are children sometimes noisy? Yes. Are children sometimes difficult to deal with? Yes. But let me tell you this, as your preacher of this church, so are you. There are times y'all make noise. There are times y'all make messes. There are times where you scream and yell. I am here to tell you a lot of us are no different than the children of today. Look at my observations here. The number one is someone must bring the children to Jesus. Someone must bring children to Jesus. Children don't come to church on their own. Someone has to bring them. Now, for most of us, our parents brought us to church, brought us to Bible classes and things like that. But someone has to bring children. Now, I love the people who say, I'm going to let my kids just choose for themselves. Well, let me tell you this. Are you going to do that about their health care? No. Are you going to let them do that about their education? No. Somebody's got to bring children to church if they're going to find out about Christ. So people, it says here, people were bringing the little children to Jesus. It doesn't say parents were bringing little children. It says people. And my observation there is not all children come to Jesus through their parents. Not all children come to Jesus through their parents. One of the things when we started this church, when Nancy and I became members of this church several years ago, the youth group consisted of 3 people. My 2 kids and Ronnie and Selita Jackson's daughter. That was the youth group. And it was a very difficult time for my kids because they went from a youth group of 30 people down to 3 people. And so they were struggling with that, and they were like, we don't have our friends here anymore, and we want a larger youth group. And so what I did is I intentionally got some of the young men of the church to go around and befriend and make acquaintance and build relationships with my kids. And to this day, some of those relationships are still strong. The reason why I'm telling you this is not all people come to Jesus through their parents. They have to come through other relationships. They say, and I'm not a statistician, but the people who grow up in the church and stay faithful in the church are those that have other adult relationships in their life. So it's not the parents only that bring people to Jesus. I do a lot of talking with people, as people wanting to become members, talking with people about their spiritual history and how things happened when they were growing up. And I from time to time, I talk to somebody and they will tell me, Well, my parents didn't go to any church in particular. We didn't go anywhere when I was growing up. But I had a friend whose parents came and got me. One of the young girls that I grew up with, her name was Stacy, and I never met her parents. But she came to church as a young lady. She was a couple years older than me. And she came to church all through high school because of the relationships she had with other adults. I'm here to tell you that not all children come to Jesus through their parents. Letter B, the church should be a place where children find Jesus. The church should be a place where children find Jesus. This is not just a babysitting service. This is not just, we're going to occupy our kids for a little bit, or we're going to tell them cute stories. This is training grounds for kids to come to know Jesus. It's not to know the stories. It's to come and have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Number 2, Jesus wants children to know Him in a personal way. Jesus wants children to know Him in a personal way. It says He took the children in His arms. I love that, because there's a lot of times when you think about Jesus and Him loving children and things like that, there was not just a spiritual aspect of it, but there was a physical aspect of it. He took the children in His arms. I was meeting with Glenn this morning. He and I have our Sunday morning meetings where he straightens me out and I straighten him out. It's a good thing we've got going on. But one of the things that Glenn and I were talking about this morning was the importance of human touch. And Jesus knew how important that was. When the children came to Him, He took them in His arms. Number 3, Jesus wants to bless children. He put His hands on them and He blessed them. Now, those are pretty simple statements that are there, but here's what I want to get to next is I want to get to there are always hindrances to Jesus blessing children. There's going to be things that are going to get in the way of Jesus being able to bless children. Jesus wants to bless children. He wants a personal relationship with them, but there's going to be some hindrances. There's going to be some things that happen. And we need to be aware of these things so that we can keep them from happening. Number 1, or letter A, is neglect. There is neglect by some parents, or there is neglect by people who come in contact with children in order to teach them spiritual things. It's not physical neglect, it's spiritual neglect. And a lot of times we as parents neglect our kids because we don't teach them the things of God, and we don't teach them how to deal with the things of this world in a spiritual way. The letter B is an example. And a lot of times there's a hindrance of people coming to Jesus because their parents their whole life have heard bad things, negative things about the church. I remember a kid that came up to me. I preached one sermon. This was back years ago. I had been with the church for 2 years. I had preached one sermon on giving the whole time I'd been there, 2 years. One sermon on giving. The kid came up to me and he says, all you ever talk about is money. And I'm like, where did you hear that from? And I know exactly where he heard it from. He heard it from his mom and dad. You see, there is neglect, and then there is bad examples that keep parents or keeps kids from becoming what they need to be in Jesus Christ. And letter C is the world. The world is an awful place right now, and it's doing everything it can to confuse this generation about what good and evil is. This world is calling good evil and evil good. And so our kids are growing up in a society, in a culture that doesn't even know what right and wrong is, and they're challenging everything that is being said as truth as being not truth. And I'm going to tell you, the internet is proponent, and they are killing our kids right now. They're killing our kids through pornography. They're killing our kids through social media, wanting to be a star, wanting to be a hero. And our kids today don't even know their own sexuality because of what's going on in the media today. I am telling you this because that is a big hindrance from people coming to know Jesus. Letter C, there is a lack of interest. And I don't mean to be harping on anything, but I'm going to tell you a lot of times with parents, there's a lack of interest in spiritual things. There are so many things that are going on in the world. There's so many good things that are going on in the world that it's just really difficult for kids because there's so many things to cause them to go in their different ways, to go to their attentions to go in different areas. There are good things out there. There's sports that are out there. There are all kinds of activities out there, but those things are a hindrance to our kids coming to know Jesus. In Mark chapter 9, verses 33 through 37, it says, they came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what are you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and he said, if anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all. Look at this. He took a little child and had him stand among them. Taking him in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Number 5, Jesus teaches us that kids can teach us about grace. That whole story right there is about how a child receives grace. I think a lot of times we as adults have a more difficult time receiving grace than little children. Letter A, they come to Jesus unable to do anything to deserve Jesus' blessing. They come to Jesus unable to do anything to deserve Jesus' blessing. That's the reason why it's easier for them to accept grace. A lot of times we as adults, we want to do something in order to earn God's favor. And let me explain this to you. There is nothing that you and I can do to earn God's favor. It is given to us freely, not because we're good enough, not because we're able to do something for God. God created us and He's given us His grace in order that we may have a relationship with Him, not only here on this earth, but throughout all eternity. And if that is not good news, you don't know good news. I'm here to tell you that Jesus Christ came to this world to show you the grace, show me the grace that I need. Every one of us in this room is broken in some way. Every one of us in this room needs God's grace. I fail daily. You fail daily. You say, well, I haven't committed any big sins. I didn't kill anybody this week. I didn't commit adultery this week. I didn't steal anything this week. Well, that's great. You didn't do that, but did you tell a lie? Some of you are thinking, I may have. We all fall short of God's glory, and we all need that grace, and we need to understand that we come before Jesus unable to do anything to deserve Jesus' blessing. Letter B, they come to Jesus with humility. They come to Jesus with humility. It's a lost thing. This whole idea of humility is lost. It's lost on this generation. It's lost on the world. Our culture does not believe in humility in any shape or form. Humility is nothing that we are able to do anymore as a culture. As a matter of fact, you can write in your notes, we have the inability to do humility. I just made that up in case you're wondering. We have the inability to do humility. And the reason being is we have been in a culture that it says it's all about me, it's all about mine, it's all about selfies. We are so narcissistic in what we do that we cannot accept things with humility. But Jesus teaches us that children come to Him with humility. Letter C, they come in obedience. They come in obedience. And so many times when it comes to our walk with God, we want Jesus as our Savior, but we don't want Him as our Lord. We want enough of Christianity so that we can feel good about ourselves on Sunday morning. We want enough of Christianity so that we can feel like we're saved, but we don't want to come in obedience. You see, He is either Lord of all or He is not Lord at all. I want to repeat that for you because I don't know if you got that. He is Lord of all or He is not Lord at all. And we need to come to Jesus in obedience just like the little children. Letter D, they come seeking. They come seeking. We need to be coming to Jesus. If we want to receive His grace, we need to come seeking Him. We need to come looking for Him. Most of us don't read our Bibles and we don't pray on a regular basis. And the reason why is we've stopped seeking Jesus. We've got enough salvation in our hearts. We come to church on Sunday morning and we cannot be like a child who is seeking something. Have you ever had a child who's about 2 years old ask you why? Oh, man, does that not get old? Everything is why. Why? When I was growing up, my mom and dad, they were very strict. They beat me regularly. It didn't do a lot of good, as you can tell. But they beat me regularly. They tried their best. One of the things that when I was growing up, they would say, you need to go do this, or we're going to go do this, and I would say, why? And you know what my parents said? Because I said so. And I grew up, and children, this is going to happen to you at some point. If your parents say something and you go, oh, I hate it when they do that. And I hated it when my mom and dad would say to me, because I said so. And I remember as a child thinking to myself, I am never going to say that to my kids. I'm going to give them a reason. Until I had a 2-year-old. And I heard my dad's voice come out, because I said so. And I looked around in the room to see if he was with me. And he wasn't. It was me. Number 6. Jesus is indignant. And underline that word, indignant. If you don't know what it means, look it up. Jesus is indignant when people do not make children a priority. Jesus is indignant when the church does not make children a priority. The reason why I'm telling you this is, like I said before, some of you have raised your kids. Mine are grown, they've moved off. I'm still waiting on grandkids. God will bless me if He wants me to have grandkids. But in the meantime, I have kids here, and you have kids here. And there are parents that need your help. There are kids that need your encouragement. And we as a church need to be representative of Christ. And we as a people need to make kids a priority. And if we're not, guess what? Jesus is going to be indignant. Number 7, Jesus was able to bless the children through the efforts of others. It's not just a parent's responsibility to raise a kid. Many of you know that when our kids turn 1, we had to stop this for a little while, but when our children in this church turn 1 year of age, 1 year old, we bring the parents and the children up. And we give that child a kid's Bible. It's appropriate for a 2-3-year-old, so that the parents can start reading to their kids. Number 1, reading to kids is very important at an early age. The world will tell you that. But number 2, they can start learning the stories. And those stories can carry them down the path of life. But when we bring them up, we don't just give them a Bible, but we pray for the parents, we pray for the kids, and we commit as a church to help raise those kids. And Jesus, in this particular story, the beginning passage, was able to bless the children through the efforts of others. Now, I've got this in here, and I want you to see this. 83% of those who come to know the Lord do so before the age of 18. 83% of those that come to know the Lord do so before the age of 18. Folks, you've heard this said, and I heard it said that when I was growing up, I got tired of hearing it, but you've heard it said we're only one generation away from losing the church. And that is so true. It is truer today than it's ever been before. It is so important that we as a church, as adults, take time to get to know our kids, to care for our kids, and to build relationships with our kids. It may not be that you have a relationship with every kid in this church, but it may be that you have a relationship with one or two. And those kids are going to be the future of this church. Well, here's the practical application. This is what I want you to get today. We as a church are going to make children a priority through number one, through prayer. We're going to do it through prayer. One of the things that I did recently is I got a list from Sandy West of all the kids of this church from birth all the way through 12th grade. And I've got that list on my desk, and I pray through that list every day. If you're in this audience today and you're a member of this church and you're under the age of 18, guess what? Your preacher prayed for you this week. That is a priority in my life, that I pray for you because I know what you're up against. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. It's not fair that you have to deal with some of the stuff you're dealing with. It's not fair that kids can't be kids anymore because of what's going on in the world. They're thrust into adulthood too early without the mental acuity to be able to handle some of the things that they're dealing with right now. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that when you're struggling, if you're under the age of 18 and you're out in the world and you're struggling with what's going on in your life, you have a preacher who cares about you, who is praying for you daily. And now some days I pray your name, and some days I just take the list and I pray for you all, but I am praying for you daily. And let me tell you this, church, anyone in this room can do that. I'm not some saint because I pray for your kids. You don't have to have the best prayers to pray for kids. But we as a church can pray for them. Number two, teachers and Bible classes. We are really focused on teachers and Bible classes. I mentioned before that we've spent some money. We're spending close to $30,000 to convert offices into a classroom. I'm going to tell you this. We put Sandy in this back room back there, put her back there, and put a door on it with some glass so we could make sure she was still breathing. But, you know, she went smaller spaces. The rest of the staff is working from home. I have a little bitty desk that I can sit at when I need to come in, and as long as nobody else is in there, it's not too uncomfortable, but as soon as somebody else comes in there, it gets uncomfortable. But we're using classrooms to meet with people. We're doing all kinds of things in order for us to focus on children. Linda Hours and Christy Chatham, I don't think they've been able to be in a church service in the last 4 months because they're spending time with your kids, teaching, taking care of, making sure that everything is taken care of. And let me say this too. It's not fair that they are doing it all. We have adults that are capable, that have done it in the past, who need to step up and volunteer to help those two ladies over there in those classrooms. They need to step up. Even if they can't teach, they can be an assistant. And even if they can't be an assistant, they can find some way to volunteer to make sure that those kids are getting what they need. We've dedicated this whole side of this church over here to our children. Now, once they get past 5th grade, they move to middle and high school, which is over here. But we're even working on getting a shed so we can store stuff in a shed so that we can make a teacher's work closet over here. And Christy and Linda are doing a great job of preparing all that and getting all that ready. But what we need to do as a church is we as individuals need to take time to teach those classes and encourage those kids. I remember the very first time I ever taught a teen class. It was a middle school class. And I remember going in there, somebody asked me if I would teach the middle school class, and I didn't really want to, but the person that asked me, they were pretty indignant, if you will, making sure that I would go in there. And I went into that middle school class, and I got to tell you, those were the worst kids I have ever come across in my entire life. It was awful. I didn't know what I was doing. They knew what they were doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I went in there as a 20-year-old, and I thought, I'm going to take care of this. And I went in there, and it was a zoo. And they were disrespectful. And they were a handful. And I got in the car, and I told Nancy, I am never doing that again. Those kids are criminals. And by the time I got home, I thought to myself, I can't call the person that asked me. I want to blame it on Monty Betts, but I'm not sure he was the one that asked me. But somebody had asked me, and I couldn't call that person and tell him I wasn't doing it anymore after one time. And so I thought to myself, these kids are not going to get the best of me. And I went in, and I sat down in that class, and I told them the rules, and I told them the consequences of those rules. I got a little training between that Sunday and the next Sunday. And I said, you mess up, you're going outside the class, your parents are going to know about it. And the whole church is going to know about it because that classroom goes right into the auditorium, and I'm going to make a spectacle out of you. I have married 4 of those kids. I did their wedding, just in case you don't understand that. And I have gotten pictures from when their babies are born. This past week, I was in Tallahassee with Joe and Dina Clavin's son, Chris. Phenomenal young man. He works with the state attorney's office. Just a phenomenal young man. And I had a chance to have lunch with him. We've known each other for years. And he sat before me this past Wednesday at lunch. And he said, Neal, do you remember when I was 7 years old and you taught VBS, you and Miss Nancy taught VBS? And I said, no. He says, I'll never forget it. You had all those blocks in the center of the room, and you were teaching VBS, and you were teaching the walls of Jericho. And you could see his face light up as he had that memory. And he said, you had us march around the walls of Jericho, and then we all pretended to have trumpets, and then we got to knock down the walls. He says, I'll never forget that. October of 2022, I'm going to be doing his wedding. You see, it's not about having a Bible class and teaching kids the Bible stories. It's about building relationships with kids that's going to last through eternity. There's going to be something awesome that happens on the first day of eternity when you're going to get to see the people that you grew up with or the people that grew up under you. And you're going to have that moment in heaven where you remember, where you rejoice over what was done. Number 3, events. We're going to have some kids' events. We're going to have some things that are going to be going on over this next year. I know the pandemic has caused a lot of havoc with that, and we haven't been able to do a lot of the things that we've been wanting to do, but we're going to start doing some more events. Number 4, we're going to have staff. We are going to be hiring a youth minister. We're in the process of that. I don't know when God is going to allow that to happen, but when that youth minister comes, that's going to be their focus, is our kids and raising those kids and building those relationships. And I love the fact that our elders are smart enough to know that we're not hiring a youth minister to become an associate minister. We're hiring a youth minister to solely focus on the kids, build relationships with them and their parents. That is exactly what a youth minister should be doing. And the very final thing that we're going to be doing is you. You have a part in this. You have to make a decision. You may have never taught before, and you may need to learn to teach. You may have never assisted in a class. You may just need to come and clean the toys in the nursery after they've been played with and slobbered on all day. I don't know. But everybody in this room should be wanting to grow through children. One of the things that I love about Sunday mornings is I love seeing the kids. I love them when they're little, and I love them when they get bigger. There's one kid in this, and I say kid, he's an adult now, he's going on 19, that comes up every Sunday and hugs me. There are teenage girls that come and hug me. There's teenage boys that come up and hit me. That's what teenage boys do. But I hit them back. Sometimes hard. If you're a teenage boy over there thinking you're going to take me, you can't yet. I love the kid that grew up in this church. He's no longer here, but he grew up in this church, and he used to say all the time, when I'm 18, Mr. Neal, I'm going to take you down. He turned 18. I said, I'm ready when you are. And he said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I said, well, before you do, let me tell you this. If we get into a fight and I beat you up, you're going to be embarrassed because an old man beat you up. And if you beat me up, you're going to be embarrassed because you beat up an old man. Either way, I win. He never wanted to fight after that. I don't know. Folks, you have to build relationships. You have to build relationships with each other, but more importantly, you need to build relationships with the children of this church. And there may be an age that you like. There may be a time in life that you can help with. I love what Lance is doing with the class that he's going to be doing on Thursday nights coming up, because it's not a class just for men. It is a class for boys and men, and the idea behind that class is that fathers can bring their sons. But let me say this to you, there are a lot of sons in this room that don't have fathers, and they need a man to come alongside them and help teach them to be men. Each Lord's Day, we sing an invitation song. When I first started preaching, I didn't like the invitation song. I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it at all, because it felt like we were going to do the same thing over and over again. And you know, we would have somebody come forward occasionally, but for the most part, the invitation song was just something we did. It was another song, and I don't know whether you remember it or not, but those of you who grew up in the church, when the preacher got to this point in the sermon, you could hear those songbooks drag right across. We've taken care of that by putting it all up online, putting it up on the screen here, so we don't have to hear that noise anymore, and you just have to listen to me. You don't have anything to do. But I didn't like the invitation song because I felt like it didn't make an impact. But as I've gotten older, as I've preached longer, I realize the invitation song, whether it has an impact or not, is up to you. You decide. I don't have to decide. I have to decide for me, but you have to decide for you whether the invitation song is going to make a difference in your life. You see, when we sing, we don't sing because we want one person to come forward and confess sin or to be baptized. We want everybody in the audience to make some kind of decision in their life, some kind of change in their life, so that when they leave here, they have truly worshiped. You see, you can come and you can sit in this building every week and never worship. And the only way you can know that you truly worship is if you left here changed. If you don't leave here changed, then you haven't worshiped. And you may be thinking, oh, well, Neal, I really haven't committed any major sins or anything. I've done pretty good this week. I haven't fought with anybody. I haven't yelled at any bad drivers or anything. I'm doing pretty good. But the reality of it is, Doesn't matter how good you were this week, you need to step one step closer to the glory of God and His holiness. And it may be today's lesson caused you to think about something you need to do different. And if that's the case, you can make that decision publicly to come forward or to privately commit to God that you're going to change something in your life. And whatever that is, whether it's public or private, we sing this invitation song to encourage each other in their walk with God and to help each other become passionate followers of Jesus Christ. Lesson is yours as we stand and sing.